There was a time when Adriano looked like the most unstoppable striker on the planet. Defenders couldn't handle his strength. Goalkeepers couldn't handle his left foot. And when he picked up the ball 30 yards from goal, there was a feeling that something was about to happen. He wasn't just scoring goals. He was destroying teams. Inter Milan had found their emperor. Brazil had found another superstar. And the football world was already asking one question. How great could Adriano become? Because this wasn't a player who looked destined for greatness. He already looked like greatness. But then, almost as quickly as he arrived, everything began to disappear. The goals. The confidence. The consistency. And eventually, the player who once looked capable of ruling world football was gone. Adriano's story isn't just about a footballer who fell off. It's about one of the greatest talents of his generation. And the tragedy of never discovering how far that talent could have taken him. Adriano Leite Ribeiro grew up in Rio de Janeiro, in Vila Cruzeiro. Football wasn't simply a passion. It was his way out. He joined Flamengo as a teenager, and it didn't take long before European football came calling. Inter Milan saw something special. So in 2001, Adriano moved to Italy. But the teenager wasn't ready to dominate Serie A immediately. He needed time. He needed experience. And after loan spells with Fiorentina and Parma, something changed. At Parma, Adriano exploded. The raw talent became terrifying. He was fast for a man of his size. Strong enough to throw defenders aside. Skilled enough to dribble past them. And then there was that left foot. It wasn't a shot. It was a weapon. Soon, Inter knew they couldn't leave him anywhere else. They brought him back. And this was when the world met the emperor. Adriano became one of the most feared strikers in Europe. He could score from ridiculous distances. He could smash free kicks into the net. He could run through defenders. And he could make world-class goalkeepers look helpless. Then Brazil came calling. And Adriano didn't look out of place among the country's greatest stars. In the 2004 Copa America, he became the tournament's top scorer and helped Brazil win the trophy. A year later, he produced one of the performances that made the football world stop. Brazil faced Argentina in the Confederations Cup final. Adriano scored twice. Brazil won 4-1. And suddenly, the comparisons became unavoidable. Ronaldo had been the phenomenon. But now Brazil had another monster. Adriano. At his peak, he looked like the perfect striker. Power. Speed. Technique. And an almost frightening confidence. Inter Milan believed they had their next superstar. Fans believed they were watching the beginning of something historic. And then came the moment that changed everything. In 2004, Adriano lost his father, Almer. For Adriano, the loss was devastating. Football had always been his escape. But now, even football couldn't completely protect him from what he was feeling. The player who once looked so powerful began struggling away from the pitch. His form became inconsistent. Injuries appeared. His confidence began to fade. And slowly, the emperor stopped looking like the player everyone feared. But there was something cruel about Adriano's decline. The talent was still there. Every once in a while, he would produce something incredible. A goal. A run. A finish. And for a moment, everyone would see him again. The old Adriano. The one who looked unstoppable. But those moments became less frequent. Inter eventually allowed him to return to Brazil. And in 2009, Adriano joined Flamengo. Then something unbelievable happened. He started scoring again. He helped Flamengo win the Brazilian championship. For a moment, it looked like the emperor had returned. Maybe the story wasn't over. Maybe Adriano could still come back to Europe. Maybe he could still become the player everyone once believed he would be. But the comeback never truly happened. Roma came next. Then Corinthians. But neither spell brought back the Adriano of Inter Milan. The body wasn't the same. The consistency wasn't there. And perhaps most importantly, the hunger wasn't the same. By 2016, Adriano was finished with professional football. 34 years old. That's it. A career that had once looked destined to become legendary had quietly come to an end. And that's what makes Adriano's story so painful. Because he didn't fail because he lacked talent. He didn't disappear because he couldn't compete. He had already shown the world that he could compete with anyone. He had played for Brazil. He had dominated in Italy. He had won trophies. He had scored goals that people still remember. At his peak, Adriano looked like he could become one of the greatest strikers football had ever seen. But greatness isn't always about talent. Sometimes it's about what happens when life hits you. And Adriano was hit hard. His father's death changed him. The injuries didn't help. The pressure didn't help. And eventually, the player who once seemed destined to rule football simply couldn't maintain the journey. So when people ask, what happened to Adriano? The answer isn't simple. He didn't suddenly become a bad footballer. He didn't forget how to play. He simply became a man carrying battles that the football world couldn't see. And maybe that's why Adriano remains one of football's greatest what-ifs. Because we know what he was capable of. We've seen the goals. We've seen the power. We've seen the fear he put into defenders. We've seen the emperor. The question is, what would Adriano have become if everything had gone differently? Would he have won the Ballon d'Or? Would he have become Brazil's greatest striker of his generation? Would we be talking about him alongside Ronaldo, Henry, and the other legends of his era? We'll never know. Because the world never got to see the final version of Adriano.